Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. 19 years of multi-party politics in this country with over 20 political parties. What have they delivered? With the increase in pressure groups and the birth of civil groups, what more can this country count on? In 1962, the first coalition happened between YK and DP. Coming closer home, we had the ones in 2011 IPC, and 2015, we had TDA. But in the most recent past, we have had pressure groups and we've also had civil groups coming up. Groups like the People Power, the People's Government, but the latest one being PLU and being the Democratic Alliance. As 2026 elections are around the corner, what can be the outlook of the multi-party system in this country? Will it deliver the promised land that every Ugandan desires? That's the biggest question. Tonight, we look at coalitions, multipartism here, but also we look at 2026 elections, what the outlook will be, but most of all, can this future of this country be past the president? That and more. But let me get to the panel. On my extreme left, the Minister of State in charge of ICT and National Guidance, Honorable Godfrey Kabyanga. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening, viewers.
We have a new name for you, the man.
Yes, yes.
The president's man.
The real man.
The real man. 2 a.m., 5 a.m. calls. Honorable Minister.
Yes, yes.
It's good to have you.
Yes, yes.
And welcome back from the celebrations.
Thank you very much, and I would like to thank all my people from Kasese for welcoming His Excellency the President.
Thank you very much.
It was wonderful.
Next to him, hosting him for the first time here on this show, Mr. Nicholas Opio, the founder and executive director of Chapter 4, a human rights advocate and activist. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy, and good evening to all the viewers and to my fellow panelists. I am delighted to appear on the show for the second time, actually.
Yes.
It's the first time you hosting me, but I've been on the show before. I think it is one of the most calm, depth show we can have on, in the country.
Thank you very much. Very good compliments coming from you there. Professor Ndebesa Mwambusha, a historian, a lecturer at that. Good evening, sir.
Good evening to you and good evening to the viewers. Glad to be here to share issues of national importance, more so those which may bring national unity, nation building, and state building.
Thank you very much. I think it's also befitting to say Merry Christmas. We're in the festivities. Merry Christmas to you, gentlemen, as you have come here. And thank you for honoring us. You can be part of the show.
We are going to demand our presence when you begin to wish us Merry Christmas.
But it's also befitting that I wish you a Merry Christmas.
No, thank you very much. That's very thoughtful of you. We appreciate it.
You can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, drop your comment there. Let us know what you think. Or go to our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines. Let us know what you think. The number for your text or WhatsApp is 0709 60 25 92. Let us know what you think. Already some messages have come through. I'll get to those in a short while. We hope to be joined by 2 more guests, Honorable Mbide and Charity, to be able to join us in this discussion. But Nicholas, allow me to start with you. This week, actually the 10th, which was I think Tuesday, is when the Honorable Norbert Mao came out to say, the Democratic Alliance is a weak civic group, and said, they are working on a new agreement with the NRM. Let's go back in time. When you look at all the parties we have in this country, all the pressure groups we have in this country, how have they performed to the desires of Ugandans?
Well, first of all, it is fitting to note that multi-party politics in this country really hasn't been around for long. When this government came into power, the NRA, now NRM, they banished political parties. There was no organizing, no mobilizing. The parties that existed then were only allowed to hold headquarters. I remember when I was still a little boy growing up in Ngulu, the late Badru Wagulu and the late Jacob Olanya and the late Cecilia Hogwala, I'm saying so many lates now, attempted to organize a UPC meeting in Ngulu town. It was the first time I was tear-gassed. Political parties were just not allowed to participate. President Museveni spent his early years demonizing political parties, blaming it for the problems, the post-independent problems this country had. Only in 2005 did we, through a referendum, allow parties to organize. Did we return this country to multi-party politics? So political party organizing as a system is still relatively very new in this country, it's still very young. And perhaps it is unfair to begin to judge them on the basis of just nearly 19 years of being able to operate. Secondly, the return to multi-party politics in this country was done begrudgingly. It wasn't out of principle. It wasn't out of the belief in the system. President Museveni himself said this, that he was tired of donors complaining, that he was tired of internal dissent. And a man who spent all his time demonizing parties campaigned for the return of multi-party politics. So really, there has not been any attempt in practice and in principle to build a political party, the multi-party dispensation in this country. We have a semblance of multi-party politics, but really with a dominant NRA or NRM that still views itself really in the mold of the revolutionary party that it is, as opposed to being an active eco party in the affairs of this country. You have a fusion between the state and the NRM. The NRM itself is not a party per se. In fact, there were discussions a while ago whether the thing was a party. And they have reminded people that the NRA is not just a party formed in 2005, but rather formed in the years of their FNASA struggles. And so you have a system that does not really have a commitment, an inbuilt commitment to building multi-party dispensation in this country. There's a semblance of multi-party politics, but the practice really is very far removed from multi-party politics. That is why the parties, in my view, remain extremely weak, extremely unable to mobilize, to register. Some parties cannot, in between elections, even have access to the populace. And that sort of atmosphere has just left us with an extremely weak system of multi-party politics that is built around cult power and cult individuals. Regardless of what the party is, name any party, all those parties are built around individuals, as opposed to being built around systems, around ideologies, around platforms. We begin to have a semblance of platforms when we have elections. But in between elections, these parties have no platforms. They cannot articulate a distinct identity and an alternative policy that they offer to this country. So that sort of system gave us the kind of parties we have. Now, because of the contradictions in these parties and internal weaknesses, you've begun to see implosions. Nearly every traditional party has internal implosion. Whether it is the UPC, we don't know who is the president of UPC now, whether it is Peter Walobiri by Learned Senior Council, or it is Jimmy Akena. Same thing in the DP, you had that implosion that led to that mass exodus to join NUP. In fact, even in the new party, NUP, there are people who are claiming the party. So you don't have a coherent political party built around ideologies, systems. The NRM is only able to survive because they are fused with the state. People have argued, and I tend to agree, that without President Museveni, it's difficult to imagine the NRM as a party. So that is what we have. The pressure groups have emerged, but those pressure groups are flames. Right from Subi to TDA, they will come and go because they are really built around the attempt to try and capture power. And once the elections are over, they tend to dissipate. So I think that all these new pressure groups will not be any different from the past.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Let me come to Professor Ndebesa. Professor, you have had Nicholas just give us the history and also give us...
He's a history professor, so he should give us a better account of history.
And before I get to the professor, Honorable Mukasambide has just joined us, the Democratic Party's Vice President here. Good evening, sir, and it's good to have you.
Thank you, my brother. Thank you for having me and colleagues.
We have also Charity Ahimbisibwe, the Executive Director of Electoral Laws and Governance Institute Good evening.
Good evening, Timothy, and a very good evening to all our viewers and plus the panel.
Thank you. Professor Ndebesa, 19 years. Nicholas says, not yet there. Did we receive multipartism in 2005 prematurely?
Thank you, but earlier on you provoked me about talking about history. So let me go history, and I will come to the 19 years. First of all, that the attempts at forming coalitions in Uganda, political coalitions in Uganda, began even before independence. Notable among them was that UPC was formed in 1960 out of a coalition between the Uganda National Congress Obote Wing and Uganda People's Union, which was a party of members of parliament, just like some Pafo in the recent past. And then you had in 1962, I think 62 or 61, after 61 elections, you had UPC KY Alliance. First Electoral Alliance and later alliances forming a government. And even UNLF was a coalition of some small groups and individuals. Even NRM was a coalition of NRA, before that is it Popular Resistance Army, and this one of not Kayira, there was one of Rure. They also formed a coalition. So and then these ones that have been formed since multi-party system was legally allowed in Uganda. So we have a situation, we have had a situation of multi-party system without multipartism. And definitely in that context, you cannot have fully functioning coalitions of parties. But the problem is not necessarily the individuals who are forming those parties. The problem is not fundamentally and basically because of these organizations' failure. The problem is what we call structural. There are structural problems. There are structural challenges. The biggest structural challenge I would refer to is that Uganda is not a nation state. We have what I would call a nationless state. You have a state without a nation.
What do you mean by that, Professor?
A nation has got certain elements. Traditionally, conventionally, in the Western world, to have a nation, you would have to have shared commonalities, a shared language, shared territory, shared customs, shared myth of origin, shared beliefs, and that kind of thing. And then those people who had those shared attributes later formed a state. You say, like Italy. In fact, the founders of Italy were saying that we have Italians without Italy. And then they formed Italy. So there was German, there were Germans without German. And Bismarck formed German, the German state. Now we have a situation here where the British came and created a state of Uganda without Ugandans. Definitely there are communities who came to form this country called Uganda, but without Ugandans. So when you have such a situation, and the population is still peasantry, scattered, they are not living in one place, definitely their consciousness of the nation is very complicated. So for somebody to emerge, appear here, it says I'm a presidential candidate, you think somebody in Chisoro will say, oh, what is Opio? You know, you cannot connect easily with Opio. From where? You say, oh, from Acholi. Where is Acholi? You know, it is abstract to the person. And when this person comes to campaign there in Chisoro, or in Busia, or wherever you will start speaking in English. And people cannot easily sentimentally connect with the person. That's a structural problem. And then you have poverty, where people can be bought, their support can be bought using a 500-gram packet of salt, which I think is less than 2,000 shillings. And we also have a history of divide and rule by the British. So a combination of those are what I'm calling structural problems that we must look at before we start looking at individuals and the organizations, why there are those challenges. Because otherwise, if you think it is because of individuals, you ask President Museveni. In 1980, he stood. And these other politicians with good ideas, I was part of UPM as a young man, a youth. And people would tell us, you have good ideas, yes, fine, but we are not going to vote you because we don't think that you can even come into power anyway. Why? Because you don't have the army. But there is a national army, called the Uganda National Liberation Army. They say, no, that is Obote's army. And Obote himself wouldn't hesitate to say, that is my army. He would ask Kawanga Semugere, where are your commanders? Now, in such a situation, you have got those structural challenges. So it is not that the individuals who are forming these parties are the ones who are failing necessarily, although they have their weaknesses, but it's because of those structural challenges. We don't have a common, of course, ideology for Uganda. We don't even have shared values for Uganda. So what we would share, which we have missed, which we should work on, is what Charity is going to talk about here. I think we lack...
You guys compared notes before the show.
Yes. It looks like.
We are always comparing.
I think we are lacking what I would call constitutional patriotism. In other words, what we have now, what those countries had, but that was a different era, they had what I would call ethnic states, ethnic nations. They were formed around those common history, common myth of origin, common language, common religion at times, common customs, common that. For us now, we cannot create that commonality here. We can't create a common language. Uganda is like the Tower of Babel. If the Tower of Babel is there, the biblical Tower of Babel, it is here in Uganda. I mean, we don't even share names together. You know, we don't share language, we don't share customs, we don't share culture, we don't share the myth of origin. That doesn't mean that we can't make a nation. USA somehow has made a nation. We would make a nation not around ethnic values, but around constitutional values, constitutional principles. If we believed in equal participation, in equality, in the rule of law, in respect for human rights, and the things like that around the constitution, we could find a nation. Now, when we have had a nation, it will be easier to have politics, coalitions, functioning political parties. But otherwise, what we have now is a hodgepodge of individuals coming together. If they are lucky, like my colleague there, Honorable Kabyanga there, and they are in power, they have the state power, and they can use RDCs to campaign for them. And if somebody becomes a rebel, you just give him some political post or some other money, and you keep that one together, then that one can work. But I think there are structural challenges. If we handled them through constitutional patriotism, we could have functioning political parties or political organizations, and gradually, of course, it is not easy. Uganda is a young state, only 130 years old, but we could have a way forward. But you see, the whole of Africa now, as we talk, it is involved in that quagmire. And we are not going to develop, by the way. Do you know why Southeast Asian countries have developed, and we are not developing, and yet we are at the same level at independence? Among other reasons is because for them they are nation states.
Okay.
And we are not.
Thank you.
It's not even because of democracy per se, but they are nation states, and we are not nation states.
Thank you very much, Professor. And I see you compared notes with Charity. We'll see Charity's notes.
I have just met you. Only that I was referring to her role as constitutional issues as well as election issues through which we can build a nation state, and then these political organizations will function.
Honorable Mbide, you have been at the center, especially the Democratic Party, and now seeing that now we have a new civic group called the Democratic Alliance. Tuesday, your President General came out to make comments about it. But let's get to what Nicholas and the professor have spoken about.
Yes.
When we look at tribal, religion, those have been the dividing lines playing in the politics of the country. How much have they influenced the multi-party politics in this country, and how far-reaching are they?
Well, I have equally listened to the professor. I listened to my brother Nicholas. Of course, usually there is a dichotomy between how the academicians understand the issues and how we find practice, particularly while implementing, obviously, a multiplicity of principles that academicians generate. True, in the whole world, obviously, you cannot find what can be succinctly defined as a nation state. It doesn't exist. Because it is very unlikely that you will find a state with a commonality of origin, of descent, of what. But also true to Uganda is that the debate on colonialism was concluded. It is not true that you can still arise such a debate in as far as you would like to interpret and define anything that has obtained along the way. Colonialists left quite some time ago. We have been given a process and a principle of constitutional autochthony. We have had, of course, players along the way. You can no longer now blame anything on colonialism. It is impossible. It is an outright impossibility. It is escapist in nature, and obviously, Ugandans ought to have generated a simple country that we would rely on to see that we are now on the way forward, or at least backwards. Today, if we talk about colonialism, you are just the equivalent of what a Nigerian says, that if you look back and you begin moving, that is where you will go. So I wouldn't think practically that is what we would rely on. So, because why? And this, I am qualifying my opinions, because number one, we have just been looking at, and I found my brother Nicholas also giving an adumbration of how, for example, political parties were arrived at here in Uganda. I would like to, personally, because once you would like to make an assessment that is fair, the assessment should be given to a kind of government that has provided before itself an opportunity to lead for quite some time. That has not, of course, obviously grown organically. It has been established thereby, meaning that those that were capable of establishing some long stay in power in Uganda were capable of making choices that would have led Uganda towards the creation of a substantive democracy, if they so chose. It is equally not true that basing on religion, politics becomes completely convoluted. No, we have got some of the countries like Norway, which has, of course, the highest human development index almost in the world, but their constitution is clear. For you to become a prime minister, you should belong to the Lutheran Church. So, meaning, reference to religion does not necessarily mean anti-democratic in terms of leadership. Then, why were parties freed in Uganda? We are now not looking at parties that were free, for example, in 1990s, 1991 in Kenya, parties that were freed during that stream of agitation, Sabasaba riots and all that. But how and why were the parties freed in Uganda? A stream of political party freedoms that were actually organized after the 2002 meeting at Kananasiki. The intention for freedom of such parties was not to free parties, but to qualify for aid under the Africa Action Plan. And Uganda being one of them. Because we can imagine the meeting of 2002 where, for example, we had presidents Abdoulaye Wade of Senegal at the time, there was Bouteflika of Algeria at the time, there was Mbeki of South Africa at the time, and Obasanjo of Nigeria. When they converged at Kananasiki facing the G8, they all agreed that under the Africa Action Plan, part of the provisions must be freedom of political organizations where you come from, if you were to qualify for aid or partnership development. And that a peer review mechanism had to be established, in fact, to oversee such. What happened was that now states started the freedom of political parties as a clog to obtain the badly needed loans, grants, and of course partnership investments. In Uganda here, our president even clearly stated, I am not freeing parties so that they can flourish, but because there are people who are actually, who at the subconscious level of their brains are all saturated with multipartism, we are freeing ourselves of them to be Bejeko. That is why parties were actually freed for registration, not for operation. Therefore, at the back of the amendment of the infamous Article 269 that had banned political party operations in Uganda, and by introduction of the 2005 Political Parties and Organizations Act, that now, of course, organized elections, registration of political parties, still had to lay a proposition, a working antique of government that now indirectly banned the operation of political parties. How? When you ban activities, political parties can't do financing. Because financing, of course, is in conformity with the activities that are going to be conducted. Number two, if you free for political parties and you ban the operation of civil society organizations in a country, then obviously you are not freeing political parties. And this has been actually obtaining in Uganda. So what we have in Uganda is not a democracy. It is a democradula. It is a dictablanda.
Yes,
or the apertura democratica. Why do we call it the same? Because there is a semblance of an election, which is periodic. But where there are no civil freedoms, then you cannot attest to an election having been held. Now, if political parties are to organize with the sole intention of participatory processes towards an election, then it has failed from the start. So, now punctuated with the system of prebendalism, where now those with the positions of authority help themselves to resources in order to strengthen themselves in terms of long stay wherever they are, against a population of the opposition that has now got to deal with the all and sundry of the poverty-stricken population that is tainted with the low relative political maturity of the masses. You are actually saying, if you wanted to say that there is multipartism and democracy, and you are only convincing me that you have got a very great sense of humor. It doesn't exist in Uganda.
Thank you very much. Let me bring in Charity. Charity, over the years, we have seen from political parties to pressure groups to now the new word that is around civic groups. What is this telling of multipartism in our country?
So political parties, civic groups, I like what Professor started with. And I think I had a bit of what Mbide is saying, but do not 100% agree because he contradicted himself. He mentions the colonialists, the story having been concluded. But he talks about a UPR system and a mechanism that was established to assess whether actually political parties are working according to the way
That's the partnership
they had planned it for us. So you see, for
if you call it a partnership, and I agree with you.
For peace, good governance, and economic progress to happen, there must be a sense of agreement of these civic groups that you want to call. Civic groups, political parties, and the populace or the population. The unfortunate thing, like I think Professor Ndebesa said it, Mbide has said it, and I think Nicola said it, is that there is a disconnect between the population and these civic groupings. So the political parties have an idea of what they want. They have ideologies that drive them. But we do not have one ideology, you heard Professor Ndebesa say. As a country, We do not have that ideology that drives us as a people. So NRM has its ideology, DP has its ideology, UPC has its ideology. Who else? Even the new formations that came yesterday have ideologies that they want to put across. FPC has ideologies. But do Ugandans have one cardinal ideology that drives them as a people? I don't think so. Because you were told some people can accept salt in exchange for their vote. That they don't understand the connection between governance and the things that happen to them on a daily basis, including educated people. Because they will ask you, why are you always there on TV shouting elections, 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 elections? For what? You know, for us, we go to our shops, we sell, we have a few things. They still can't put the dots together. That tells you we still have a problem. If you look at the American population, for example, they are able to tell that the foreign policy of America was not benefiting to them as a people. They were not, and they could not connect their pocket, as in the wealth within themselves, to the foreign policy. They wanted to have a connection between the foreign policy and the wealth they are making at home. If the two are not connecting, then let's sort our home issues first. And so they go to an election and decide, let's go with this president because he seems to promise to improve our wealth. Now, for Uganda, civil society organizations have ideologies. We have things we have aspired for the people of Uganda because we have seen what good governance means. We are a civic grouping, as civil society organizations. We know that good governance equals to peace. We know that elections are a tool for stability and that it is good to hold credible elections because they empower the population. We know that constitutions are good instruments. So we know these things as civil society. How many Ugandans know these things? They wake up in the morning and they're thinking about the next food that they have to themselves. And so yes, an election is coming in 2026. Okay, we shall see when we get there. When the temperatures pick up, we shall see when we get there. But the good thing is that at the end of the day, some of them actually show up and vote. I actually came with a message for Ugandans that as much as we know that we have settled the question of the presidency, we will not change the president as long as President Museveni is on the ballot paper. But we can change the members of parliament. That every time there's an election in Uganda, we can decide to overturn the whole parliament and make sure that there is no one single member of parliament who comes back, except for this 11th parliament. There's a man called Kaberuka from Kanungu. I want him to come back. He's the only man who stood out of a crowd while everybody else was aggrandizing around with coffee and all these things. He wrote and he said, no, my people have asked me to stand with them and present the following ideologies and say the following things. And he stood by himself. So until we get MPs who know that they will stand for their people, they will represent the views of the people that sent them there, because that's what the Constitution says, that me, a voter, I will devolve or I will give away some of my powers. And I think that's why Professor Ndebesa was saying Charity is coming here to talk about the Constitution. Yes, because the Constitution sets a standard. If we didn't have a standard, then what were we going to be governing ourselves with? So the colonialists went, they taught us the law according to the way they knew how to handle it. Do we have the British law? Hardly do we have any differences there. So did they really go? My friend, indeed, they tell me the truth. Did they really go? If everything we do almost faces what they told us to do, we only follow what they taught us. So we are still following within their footprints. If we had crafted our own Ubuntu constitution, for example, if we had something which we had crafted which was our own, I'll give you the example of South Africa. South Africa, after apartheid, was a very torn country. They were so, everywhere and all over. One of the things South Africa did, and when I read their foreign policy, I understood, they decided that everyone in South Africa was going to be a diplomat for South Africa. They called civil society organizations and made them understand why it was important to create South Africa, a country called South Africa. Not one that was divided, one that had wars, one that had what. They wanted to work for economic development. And so everybody, the whole engine of the infrastructure called South Africa worked towards that. Do we have that in Uganda?
Wow.
What we have is everybody looking out for what they want to benefit from. So I'll create a vehicle as long as I'm going to benefit from it, not because of the country called Uganda.
Very interesting. Honorable Minister, let me come to you. The man himself. The three things the president spoke about before the referendum were pressure from donors, especially people who had the idea of multipartism, but also the young people were too full and just needed somewhere to have an outlet for this multipartism. I didn't want to use the words he used exactly, but those were the objectives for multipartism. Did we have it wrong at the start? Have you been intentionally, as the NRM, frustrating multipartism?
I think we didn't have it wrong from the start. We have to start somewhere anyway. But I think
saying starting on a wrong footing,
whether
wrong foundation.
Whether wrong foundation or not,
Going around and
you
around.
must start somewhere. I mean, those are some of the things people tend to theorize. But whether wrong footing or correct footing, you must start from somewhere. I think the biggest problem for 62 years of independence, we have had only, I think, 34 years of multipartism. I think Professor Ndevesa will correct me if I'm wrong, because for him, he's good at history. And when you look at 34 years of multipartism, we have not yet matured politically.
34?
Because there
I
are
think it's
some...
19 years.
We
actually.
are looking...
19. Actually,
No, because from 62 to...
no, they were banned from 1986 to 2005, which is 19 years.
No, there was multipartism before 86.
Yes. but
Because
they say-
from 80 to 85, there was multipartism. And I think from 62 to 66, there was also what? Multipartism.
But to put it correctly, they were multi-parties, not multipartism.
Yes. They were registered parties.
Whether you call it
But not the
multi-party or...
The minister is
Difference.
offering
Yes.
national guidance.
whether you are calling it multi-party without multipartism, but at least parties competed.
Sure.
And I don't know your definitions of multipartism, because for you are constitutional lawyers and whatever. But parties did what? Compete, participate. And whatever definition you have in the law, that's not my biggest problem. But, Timothy, I think our multipartism or multi-parties have not really matured per se. Some of these countries we are talking about, which have affected their democracy, they have practiced multipartism for years. And they have also learned their own what? Lessons. We cannot say they have been very, very perfect. They have had their own challenges, they have had their own problems, but they have been consistent. And I think that's what we are lacking in Uganda. We have not been what? Consistent. Because we go multi-party system today, then another time it is abolished or whatever, and then we have a lull, then we start again. I think that has been a very, very big problem. But I'm telling you, all these other countries which we admire, they have also had their shares of what? Of challenges as far as the multi-party system is concerned. Even the United States has its own what? Challenges. You saw the other elections where Biden defeated what? Trump. There was chaos. And people don't even talk about it because they think probably America has the most perfect, probably, democracy. Because even the Americans think they must be the examples in the world, the big brothers, as far as multi-party politics is concerned. I think we have had those challenges, and which we all need to sit down and sort out. But all in all,
and Honorable Minister, thank you for the 1962, 1985. But let's focus on the ones of the NRM. There are 19 from 2005 to date.
yes.
What have you done to ensure that there is pluralism in the political space? Not just parties that Nicholas has one, Professor has one, and we are just counting numbers. But there are actual players being involved in making a difference on the national scene as the NRM.
First of all, there is a constitution. And multi-party politics is entrenched in the what? In the constitution. And what you call different players coming up with, that's what it is. Because all MBD has DP, and it's there, it's a party. NRM is also a party. NUP came, and it's a party. FDC came, and is competed, and got members of parliament, and participated. But what I'm telling you is, we have not yet reached the stage of perfection. I cannot say, you know, Uganda has the best multi-party system. Not at all. We haven't reached there. But we are on the right track. And what I would beg from all these participants, let them consolidate their positions. Let them build structures of their parties. I think the biggest problem, most of the parties, opposition parties, are focusing on fighting President Museveni. Because if you listen to all of them, it is about removing President Museveni, not even building structures of their own what? Over their own parties. And probably even in the NRM, we are looking at President Museveni as a father figure, which is also not
a high priest, not even a father figure.
Which might also be dangerous for what? For NRM. I'm NRM myself. But which might also be very dangerous for NRM. What about if he's not there? So we need to build strong structures for us to be able to build strong parties.
But Timothy, if I may, Honorable, the devil is in the detail.
Yes.
You claim political parties can organize, can participate. But the point that all of us have made is that the conditions obtaining in the country make it impossible for political parties to organize meaningfully and coherently. If a political party activity, let's say in Kasese or in Igulu, my own district, cannot happen without altercation with the police, without interferences from RDCs, from district internal security officers, what sort of system or atmosphere are you creating for parties to survive? When every opponent of President Museveni, serious ones, have to contend between court, prison, and campaign trails. What sort of atmosphere are you creating for multi-party politics?
You know, you guys, when you are talking, I was listening.
But you are the government.
Now when I'm talking, you don't even want me to
imagine.
Me being government doesn't mean
let me also
you should cut me short.
No, Honorable Minister,
yes.
let them make the submission so that you can respond.
Yes,
okay, now,
what we would like you to say.
make the submissions, I will listen.
I respond. Okay,
but you also give me time
Yes.
to respond.
Yes.
Yes.
Honorable Midday.
Because I would like now, first of all, to urge you to also defend one political party called the NRM. I would like him to tell me how it can also operate. Because I believe it does not operate. It is part of the parties that are curtailed. It has got somebody who appoints everybody that conducts an election for that party. Everybody. And then he turns out to be unopposed. Then he now continues, helps himself to state resources to again determine further and the better particulars of funding of that party. Tell me, do you really believe that a party of that nature can be a benchmark for political party organization in Uganda.
Okay. Honorable Minister, please respond.
You know, he's complaining about President Museveni appointing all electoral commissioners.
No, for the party, generally forms the party like a task force.
Yes.
First of all, we as NRM, we have our own internal democracy. We have our own internal democracy. Even if we said Museveni will run as a sole candidate, it is our own internal democracy.
Can I also
That's how it is.
Let him, please allow him to finish. Professor, I'll come to you. Please finish.
It is our own internal what? Democracy. Whether President Museveni is appointing who and who, it is within his mandate as president. Has he appointed anybody against the law?
Yes.
So if you want,
Yeah,
and
dismissed one
if you want
for
to
competition.
stop President Museveni from appointing any people, then your constitutional lawyers make amendments to the law. But so long as he has that mandate, he will appoint. And that one shouldn't be a question of debate. You are good lawyers. You should know that to repeal one law, you must have another what? Another law. So me, what I'm saying is, yes, there might be issues as far as multi-party democracy is concerned. But it now exists, and we should operate within the law. And if there is anybody who has been harassed for having rallies, I don't support it myself. I don't completely. Recently, Bobi Wine was in Kasese, and I was there. And I told the security or whatever, Bobi Wine has the right to hold his rallies, and they went on very free. I would love that he goes around, so long as he also follows the what? Follows the law. You know, sometimes we put their laws, and after putting them there, we, politicians, when they start squeezing us, we again start doing what? Complaining. There is this Public Order Management Act. Some people have always said it is Right Honorable Mama Mbabazi who introduced it in what? In the Parliament. And when it was passed, it again worked against him at one time. So these are laws which are there, and we put them there, we pass them. So if they touch us, we shouldn't again do what? Complain. But what I'm asking from all political players is, if let us follow the regulations of the game, and if we do that, there will be no problem. But I still believe we haven't reached that level where we have perfect democracy, because our democracy is still very, very young. Probably Professor Ndebesa will educate us on that as a historian. All these countries which have reached that level where there is a level playing ground, they have been in multi-party politics for 100 years, 200 years.
Even Ghana?
And
Ghana,
they have,
no.
No, I am saying some of them.
No, you were talking of America.
Yes.
Let us talk about
African
only
states.
democracies.
Now,
in the US.
yes, they
Why
but you
wouldn't I?
know,
Because I
you
would
know,
like to guide you on tenets that establish democracies. Really, it is not entirely historical that it is time frame. No, it is focus on what you establish.
It is principle.
exactly. But what?
How do you come up with an electoral commission? If in Namibia it is done by, if Mozambique it is done by parliament.
Botswana.
Botswana.
Look
Namibia.
here,
Namibia.
you know,
Ghana.
Bide. That's what I'm
If
telling.
Ghana,
Bide,
it is a council of elders,
let
and here it is a,
let
it is
me
done
also
by a
tell
candidate.
you,
let's hear the Honorable
We are
Namibia
heading
comes up
to
with
the
an
democracy.
electoral commission based on their constitution.
No.
What does our constitution say?
that a candidate...
What does our electoral law say?
This is what it says. Let me tell you what it says, because
and that
leaving them as lingering questions would imply
that what?
Actually it says
That
something
what?
flourishing. It says that the president appoints the electoral commission. The president can remove the electoral commission for on account of incompetence, misconduct. You can imagine. And the president has never stopped being a candidate. So clearly, the candidate appoints those that should count an election. We are guiding, and Honourable Minister, when you come here, speaking on behalf of government, it would be foolhardy for us to praise you for not having listened to us when we are proposing, I think, frameworks that could work. Because if we are heading towards a democracy that we would head to, you need to listen to divergent views, but so that you can inform cabinet. Number one, we have been espousing processes and procedures. You were talking of historical countries that have existed for 200 years. We are telling you Ghana hasn't.
Look,
Ghana has not, but this is what it has done.
Okay. Honorable Mbide.
Yes.
Lastly,
What I'm saying, Timothy, is
yes,
the current law gives the president those powers, and the discussion has not yet reached electoral reforms. You're getting me? Our discussion right now has not yet reached electoral reforms. But so long as
by the way, law, even Syria had laws, but so we don't have to talk about
now. You know that's your problem, Honorable Mbide, because you think you have some specialization in knowledge.
No,
you are a lawyer. I respect you.
Yes.
But what I'm telling you is that the current law gives the president those powers. And now you are talking about Namibia. Namibia's constitution might be completely different. Yes, Ghana is doing well in democracy, and I like it. And that is a unique unique experience. And we can also do that. That one I don't object. But what I'm saying is
now you are coming
the laws which we have currently, that's what they say.
If we're heading in democracy,
but
we should be tending towards amendments.
Honourable Minister, you know, it has been here. Even the Honourable Mao was here, and we asked him about those constitutional and electoral reforms that he was discussing. Do you see the playing field as even for anyone to be able to play alongside the NRM? Because the ref is from the NRM, the linesman, using a football analogy, the linesmen are from there, appointed by the same person. To create a field that is enabling and fair, do you think it is possible to have electoral laws or reforms in time for these elections?
It's good the Honorable Mao was here, but those electoral reforms can't come. Because last time, there were some amendments of the law. It was done, I think, in the July 2020, and the elections were in 2021. And it's also good that the person in charge now, the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs, who is supposed to bring the amendments, is from the opposition.
Okay.
So where are they?
But I think the debate has become stale.
Yes, where are they?
Let me come to Nicholas. There is a sticky point that something that the Honourable Norbert Mao talked about, creating a vent for the pressure to get out. When you walk in this country, any corner of it, you feel a tension of what the introduction of our constitution is, bloodshed and all these things, the fear of that. The question of transition, when do we start to talk about it, especially that this country needs one, a peaceful one? And how do we talk about it?
President Museveni is not a multi-partist. I don't think he admires multi-party politics. It's agreed here on this panel that he returned to multi-party politics begrudgingly, not out of principle. And he has conducted himself and his government in a way that undermines the dispensation that the minister is talking about. And there have been numerous examples of that political parties cannot organize. They have to get some permission from somebody sitting in police. That by a letter, police spokesperson, the son of an NRM historical, Mzee Galit Kajabaju, can stop NUP from organizing countrywide tours. That is the kind of situation we have created. We do not have government commitment to building a thriving multi-party dispensation. I don't think that President Museveni even thinks about transition. And I think that the Honorable Norbert Mao might be well-meaning, but he will soon realize that he's spitting against the wind. It is clear from public statements, public conduct, that President Museveni does not think about transition in the same way that many of us are thinking about. For him, transition is the ritual of elections. People will decide when they don't want me, I will go. Okay? He does not believe in the transition we are talking about, which is to say, you're way past your sell-by date. It is important for the stability of this country to create an opportunity for at least a schedule. You see, when people don't have a schedule, they get frustrated. That's why term limits were important. We can deal with a bad president for 10 years, we can wait him out. But when there is actually no schedule, and you're conducting yourself in a manner that shows you have no intention of leaving, or you want to create an hereditary leadership to replace you, you cause problems and tensions in the country. And what we are seeing happening is a tension arising from that impossibility of transition in the way we think about it. He thinks about transition differently. And the Honorable Norbert Mao may have created a vent. In fact, in some instances, he said he has created a shortcut. There was traffic jam, and he has jumped the queue and gotten close to power. But I think that many people still remain unconvinced that the promises that he has made, and the Honorable Minister says it is the reform Mao is supposed to bring. Mao, as an individual, cannot bring reforms because those reforms are adopted by cabinet. Mao is only a messenger, a minister to bring them to parliament. If cabinet has not approved those proposals, you've heard his own frustration saying, I have all the reforms I need to make. There's no budget for it. There's no time for it to discuss and adopt in cabinet. What does he do? He runs the Law Reform Commission. It's a sign of frustration. It is not a Mao reform. It is an NRM executive government reform. It's a cabinet reform that should be adopted. In my view, whether you reform the laws now or not is immaterial. It's too late in the game. We are going to have nominations in the second half of next year. Okay? No meaningful reforms can happen now. However, no meaningful legal reform. However, what I think can happen is that we can change our culture in the way we apply the laws we have, so that you don't have people like the spokesperson of the police stopping a political party from carrying out lawful, legitimate activity. So you don't have RDCs pulling people off radios when they go to campaign in districts. Those we can do now. Let's start doing it now. I don't think that there's any willingness on their part to do that.
Thank you very much. Let's take a quick break, but before we do that, let me read some messages that have come through. This is Julius Asimwe, a senior citizen in Bara, says elections in Uganda is a cover used by the sitting government to confuse the public, where every part of the government is militarized, centralized using military agents. Okay, thank you very much for that. Greetings, Timothy and the panelists. Wonderful show there. I totally concur with the professor on the presence of structural bottlenecks in the construction of Uganda. Assuming we dismantle Uganda, should we assemble it into a nation state based on the definition and prescriptions of the very Western actors that assembled it in the first place? I suggest a consultative national dialogue to define the cardinal things that we need to stand by. This is Simpson Muhwezi. Okay. Good evening, Timothy. I would like to inform my sister, Charity, that electoral laws, that the politics in America is very different with what works in Uganda. Very big populations of America have the basic needs, and more so it makes them think beyond the effect of policies, elections in their lives. But in us, Uganda, 3 out of 4 Ugandans, the populations are still struggling to sustain themselves in terms of food, clothing, job opportunities, health, due to very bad governance. Okay? You write a very lengthy one there. Finally, there is no opposition in Uganda. Those who are university graduates seeking jobs are being exploited by this country. The final one. Good evening, Timothy. Thank you for the show. Every time I see Honorable Mukasambide in the studio, I have to look for an Oxford or an American dictionary, because I know it won't be easy or business as usual. The terminology are very concerning. Let's take a break on that one and come back after this.
To be a winner, it requires that you exceed all the limits of mankind and womankind. But when you play with MTN Momo, winning is easy. Simply get your phone and use the Momo app or dial *165*3#, enter merchant code, enter amount, enter your Momo PIN, and pay. Congratulations, easy! Your stomach is full, and now you stand a chance to win mobile money with MTN Momo.
The parish development model launched in 2022 by President Yoweri Museveni to fight poverty and enhance service delivery at the parish level has disbursed over 1 trillion Uganda shillings to more than 10,500 circles, benefiting over 1 million individuals countrywide. The government of Uganda appreciates you for embracing PDM and using it to move away from Okorera Ekidakyunka. You are encouraged to continue participating in this journey towards socio-economic transformation.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachikuwa. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda, haven't you heard of the parish development model, PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a poultry project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that.
Okay.
The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Welcome back from that quick commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. The conversation keeps continuing. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I'm joined by Charity Ahimsiwe. I'm joined by Honorable Mukasambide, Professor Ndebesa Mwambusha, Nicholas Opio, the Honorable Minister Godfrey Kabyanga, and a lot of messages still coming through. Someone, Tumsime says, as long as our focus is mainly on tribal politics, tribal political parties, as well as pressure groups that won't add value to the life of a citizen, we're in for a long road. Perhaps we are recycling the same strategies, expecting different results. From 25 years, we have been changing faces on the ballot, paper, but maintaining the same method. Use of blackmail against fellow strugglers here, voters to get confused along the way. Okay. Julius Muchunguzi from the Electoral Commission says, the 2025-2026 general election is a fulfillment of the promise of Article 1 of the 1995 Constitution, the people of Uganda. It cannot and should not be undermined in any form. All power belongs to the people. Does it?
I would like, because you see, Honorable Minister.
Oh,
sorry. Okay.
Let me come to
Okay.
It's not about the
Let the
Honorable
professor
Minister.
come in. There is
I'm
something
going to
we
come
shall...
to you.
It's about
Honorable.
the Constitution.
Let me come to the professor.
Okay, much obliged.
Professor, the multipartism, and you talked about Uganda, different tribes coming together, all these things formed somewhere else. How do we construct this project called Uganda for posterity?
Thank you. Let me first give some general overviews of what I've been listening to from my colleagues here. The legal question is not our fundamental problem. The laws are not our fundamental problem, even if we revise them. As long as the spirit, the values, you know, we have, let me turn around the Jesus' statement. I think we have a new bottle with old wine. We have a constitution, a liberal constitution, but the values inside that bottle are still illiberal. They are not liberal. They are not multipartism or multi-party or pluralism. Actually, I think Honorable here was asking what is the difference between the two. You see, multi-party, having a multi-party is having the legal existence of the parties in place and on paper. But when it comes to practice, in terms of your values that you believe in, you find if you have different values from what you have put in the constitution will not work. Even NRM, you are talking about that the party should have structures. NRM has structures, has state privileges and all that. Even the NRM is not functioning the way parties should function.
Yes.
You see what was happening in Chisoro, what happened elsewhere. The party says this is our candidate. The other one stands as independent when he is not independent. That means even that party is because it is in power. It's because it is a state party, as Opio pointed out. So the challenge we have is fundamental in terms of the value system. Now, your first question was about these civic organizations that are not functioning. You cannot have civic organizations without civic culture and principles and values.
Not civic organizations, civic groups, like the patriotic league.
Whether they are groups or organizations or whatever, I am saying you must first have civic principles, civic values, and we can talk about the elements of civic values. Civic values are somehow universal. They cut across different ethnic groups, religious groups, tribal groups, ethno-nationalism. Here we are talking about like the principle of equality. Do you believe in the principle of equality? Do we believe in the principle of checks and balances? Do we believe in balance of power? Do we believe in participation, that there should be equal participation? Do we believe in human rights and principles? So even if you had other laws and you had the reform of laws, the issue is a political question. Have we resolved the political question? So that we are all together and we have accepted civic values, even in politics, so that we go by those principles, civic values and principles, which will guide us, that are laid down in the Constitution. Otherwise, when people don't believe in what is in the Constitution and what is in the laws, even if you make other laws, people will still flout them. The question of flouting laws is not because they are not there, they are not necessarily because they are weak. I don't think even that the 1995 Constitution is necessarily giving the president too much powers. Even if you reduce them, he can still have those powers anyway. If the political norms that he holds or anybody in that position holds are still illiberal, he will still flout those laws. You get what I mean? So now, going about what can we do? First of all, we have to put this country to the right path. Whether we want to go by civic politics or we want to remain in illiberal politics. Because we have to realize that this country is still a project in the making. I mean, this state and nation is still a project in the making. And we have to appreciate that we need to come together and accept to negotiate and dialogue and come up with these agreed upon general universal kind of principles and values to go by. And then we say anybody who goes against them will be brought to book. But otherwise saying that we should remain the way we are and we don't agree to come together and negotiate and agree on certain civic principles. If some people are not getting me clearly, maybe they will go to Google and find. There is a difference between civic principles, civic values, and ethnic values. There is a difference between ethnic nationalism and civic nationalism. The two are not the same. And therefore, this country is not yet a nation state. So I hear many people here talking about amending the constitution, putting in place the law. Even if you put them there, they are there and they are flouted by our parliament itself. It flouts them. The executive flouts them. The judiciary, you can imagine this case of trial in the military court martial. It was decided by the Constitutional Court. Then it was appealed more than 3 years ago. The judiciary decided to sit on it. Now, isn't the law there? Aren't the procedures laid down? But somebody can still undermine them. So the question of group organizations and their functionality is a political question. So this question of wanting to blame even these other political parties, multi-party systems, even the movement itself is not working properly, by the way, Bwana Minister. Can I put this question to you? Because you are the right person. Minister of National Guidance. Do you have a national guidance agenda? Yes. Do we have a national guidance agenda based on civic principles? We need to have a national guidance agenda to guide this country towards building a nation state. We don't have a nation state yet. That doesn't mean that we cannot have it. We can have it. But it must be an intentional project whereby we can be, first of all become humble enough, have humility enough to accept that we need participation of all and we respect all, so that we exchange ideas after appreciating that there is a problem. Because there are those who think there is no problem. There is a fundamental problem in post-colonial states. My friend here, Mukasambide, was saying, let's forget about colonialism. We are a post-colonial state. Post-colonial states have got certain characteristics. One of these characteristics is that they are not nation states. They are nationless states. If you don't appreciate that one, you will find DP only confined in Uganda. Museveni made sure that he reduced it to Uganda. Then UPC was reduced to Lango. Did you realize that situation? NRM is almost reduced to the Western Uganda. It is in other areas because they are notables here and there, but in terms of what people think, that is where we have been reduced. And so, this project of Uganda is not an impossible project to undertake. But we need to come together and have a national agenda to solve not only this multi-party problem. Now we are talking about elections. Elections alone will not build Uganda. And actually having periodic elections does not give us democracy. Because there are elements of democracy. I can give some here. Democracy is not the element of democracy. One is periodic, free and fair elections. That is one element of democracy. But another one is the participation. Actually, participation is very critical. Citizen participation. Then when it comes to what we call horizontal accountability, accountability is a principle. Then there is horizontal accountability, where different arms of government hold each other accountable, which we call balance of power. Now, you find the judiciary listening to the executive that don't give people bail. And then the Chief Justice starts saying, I'm going to give guidelines, I'm going to do this one. Then you find the Parliament coming up with a resolution that the different resolutions that government should implement, the executive, then the executive ignores them, and business remains as usual. So you find that we have that situation where we are not even following the rule of law, which is an element of democracy. But people think that having elections, so 2026 there will be democracy in Uganda. No, democracy is a continuous exercise. Now, I am not suggesting anywhere that we are a perfect, the minister was saying, yeah, we are not yet there, but are we on the trajectory of being there? It's not a matter of saying, no, we see all countries have passed through those processes. Yes, they do have, but we must follow, we must see that we have a trend. Like USA or Sweden or somebody has talked about Norway. You find a country like Norway has had a constitution for the last 200 years. So is USA. But they have not changed them like pants now, every other time. Because the constitution should be looked at almost as sacred. Like we have the Bible, which is interpreted, not necessarily altered by removing some chapters or banning them like Pastor Mujingo says.
Professor.
No, we have to build this nation state so that it is functional. And let's not bother too much about the legality, that we need to change the laws. We gave these powers to this, that the constitution was this. Even if the constitution was changed, I don't think even the fundamental challenge of nation building in Uganda, a democratic building in Uganda, is the failure, is the absence of the laws. The laws are there, they can always be fine-tuned. What is a failure is what is the heart. I repeat, we have got an old bottle, a new bottle containing old wine.
Thank you. Honorable Mukasambide, I know you have something you want to respond to, so let me allow you to respond before I ask you a question.
Yes. Of course, my advice to the professor would be for the historian to avoid the explanations of legalities. Because whatever you want to form and you want to call it a nation state has to follow the law. So clearly, the bedrock of formation of states.
I didn't say we shouldn't follow the laws. I'm saying they are not the fundamental problem.
Follows the law. So
law and order,
Professor,
following the laws.
I thought you were extremely resistant on my interjections, so I would expect you.
I did not say.
But you are also an interjector, so let them interject you.
Yes, but you see, I cottoed when he was resisting my own resistance.
You cottoed Nakutu.
Now you have seen how it is bad.
Gentlemen, Professor, make your submission so that I can come back to you.
But first of all, we are talking about national issues of national importance, of state building. Those quotas, I don't want to listen to them.
There will be
Professor,
Honorable Mbide, let him finish.
Let me
because
proceed.
Let's be serious.
Because the professor does not have a dichotomy between class and debate. I am not in your class, and clearly you owe me some degree of respect, if you need one.
No, I'm not going to respect
if you need
those
some
bombastic words.
If you need some.
Professor Ndebesa, let him finish.
What I wanted to finish
Okay, you finish. And
was to say that I didn't say that rule of law or law and order is not an element of democracy. The point I was making is that democracy cannot be practiced in abstract. That we must have democracy tomorrow and we have laws and we shall have democracy. It must be practiced. And one way of practicing, we must be informed by value system. So we must have the value system correct. That's all I was saying.
Okay.
Not that we shouldn't
So
follow the
what I
rules.
was saying, and of course this is always a problem with the professors, they do not distinguish between debate and class. When you come to debate,
But don't
here
talk about
you have
words
to
that
be
we cannot
you have to be
Professor
debated
Ndewisa, let's
against.
listen to
You
Honorable
have to be
Mbi.
debated against. You see, it's like a goat in a market. However much you frown, you cannot actually resist being priced because here you are in a market. And so this is what I would like to tell you. You need to describe the character of the president of Uganda in order for you to understand what Madame Charity said when she agreed, she stated and I agreed, and many people agree, that President Museveni must be the first person to leave power if the country is to get a fresh start. So you describe, and for ministers, for the Minister of National Guidance, the guidance you need to give the president is that one, is now he has grown beyond an institution himself. And two, he has got a character of factors and combinations that cannot actually be factors that are palatable for the establishment of institutions. One, because he himself, he believes for anything to be done, he should choreograph a procedure where he is a puppet master, and that every institution established is made up of puppets and muppets under the control of the puppet master. Everything, by the way, and this is why now I want to get to the law, the laws that the Honorable Minister states that actually are being followed. That at the subconscious level, you know, what is the penultimate process that is actually capable of making the country arrive at the laws, so that the laws can now be understood as the tool of operation against any establishment that would have done for development of a nation state. I have stated here that no nation state exists, but countries have looked at their histories. I have stated, and I continue to state so, that the debate on colonialism was concluded. States have had an opportunity to rephrase, to restructure, to redirect their own courses. States that have got leaders that have actually had affinity for the establishment of nation states have moved forward. We have been giving an example of Ghana. Ghana has had a history also of a coup d'etat and leadership that is the subject of a coup d'etat, just like Uganda. But what happened? They established a procedure that now allows the flourishing of of a democracy. How? They have established what they call a council of state. Now that council of state is akin to a council of elders. And that council of state advises almost, because it is stated that the electoral commission, which is for purposes of counting elections, is appointed by the president, but the advice of council of state, which includes among others elders from regions, basing on values that are established under their constitution, particularly Article 70, I think, including the IGP, CDF, and the council advised the president on how to come up with an electoral commission that ultimately then is okayed by parliament. Now, the beginning of an established process that leads to an election of members of parliament that will ultimately now perform the function that makes a stability of a political process, creates Ghana's elections as free and fair. Not thoroughly free and fair, but when you look at the Clean Elections Index, you find that Ghana is safe. Number two, there are countries we can look at.
But Honorable Midi, on that same point that you're talking about, that project, that council has worked for Ghana. what will work
Yes.
for Uganda.
First of all, you should know what you don't want in order for you to come up with what you want.
Or you should
So
know
at least what we don't
or
want.
you should know what you want before you...
Both of them must definitely be handled simultaneously. So I began with what we don't want. So we don't want a situation where one candidate appoints. First of all, you begin with his own political party. He appoints everybody that organizes his political party in terms of elections, in terms of membership, in terms, those that are elected are almost monumental in nature. He can appoint and even remove them. Now that is at the level of a political party. Then he comes in the national election, he appoints the person that should count and declare the winner of an election. Then he emerges as a solo candidate from his own political party to come, compete for an election, having generated a political party whose constitution, my brother Nicholas has even just told you that when you look at the preamble, the constitution dates back beyond the registration of the party. The party was registered in 2005. The constitution says part of the achievements in the preamble were done in 1979.
For NASA days.
Yes. So I can tell you that the president himself now is a blockade. He's a facility, fanfaronade, against any process towards establishing a nation state in Uganda.
Honorable Mbide.
So this is what we need to
Just
do.
hold on, Professor.
I just want to make
Just hold on, Professor. Let me come. I just want to follow up a question. Honorable, you're talking about the NRM, how the president is the blockade to where we're going. But you have a cooperations agreement with him. Really, you're in bed with him and you're complaining about him?
I think let me also address it.
You're looking for a new one. So it's self-defeating.
I didn't know the cooperation agreement was part of the topics. But now let me address it. Just like the constitution, it was never followed.
Your president...
The agreement alone, unimplemented, has nothing to offer. Just like a constitution.
All of it has not been...
It has never. Where was the implementation of that agreement?
Where was it?
Except when we established it and appointed a tool of implementation, who is the minister that told you he has nothing to do. So he told you, and I thought you attended a program that I never attended, but you are asking me questions whose answers we are given.
Honorable Mbide, the same President General on Tuesday said he's seeking the renewal of the corporations agreement. If it wasn't, if there is nothing that has been accomplished, what are you seeking?
I wish I was there. I don't know why he's
seeking
seeking
the Deputy President
a renewal.
of the DP doesn't know.
That he's seeking a renewal?
Yes.
I don't know.
So you don't know what your president is saying?
I personally, no, how would I know what the president says everywhere?
Your democratic
I
president.
can only, because you see the constitution allows the president to make statements as a chief spokesperson. And it creates an occasion for us to ratify or even divert from that statement.
That's the position of the Democratic Party, isn't it?
I wish he states it, because that is your position. So I would want a situation where you play his voice, because why would I make analysis on particularities that you are only making as allegations?
Okay.
That would be unfair. So let me conclude.
Yes.
What Uganda needs is to benchmark from processes that have worked elsewhere. What processes have worked, for example, in Kenya? The processes that include, among others, the establishment of Chapter 6 on ethics and integrity for particulars of those that would have to be in positions of leadership. What processes have worked in Mozambique, where electoral commission is elected by parliament? What processes, so that we know that we are on the way to democratization. But what we are doing is actually a reverse. That by way of nomenclature, we have got political parties, but in terms of operation, we have one party, which even also itself is a pseudo, but curtails all the operations of other political parties, and it exists in a singular capacity. So, in my opinion, at least, if we don't do this, and the Minister for National Guidance needs to guide, that must be the way forward. What has now resulted because of authoritarianism is that the country is formed has formed a dichotomy of two political entities, those in favor of his stay and those against it. That is the resultant effect when you are looking at cause and effect as a principle.
Charity, let me come to you, and I'll pose two questions. And one is, what is the Uganda we want? Because we are here discussing a lot of good English, a lot of things, but a citizen out there is looking for an environment where he can take his child to school, a good school, a good health center. They have affordability, they have purchasing power. And how do we achieve that Uganda that we want?
I like the question, Timothy, and I don't think we don't know the Uganda we want. I think we know the Uganda we want, because if you look at all the standards that my colleagues have been talking about, then we know the Uganda we want. Uganda ratified the UN Convention Against Corruption. Have we ever even cared to follow what we ratified? We said we will have zero tolerance to corruption. But what do we see? Everyone who is corrupt is released every once in a while. The other day, the man who sold bicycles of Kapchorwa, he was pardoned by the president after he had been locked up on crimes of corruption and misuse of state resources. And that case still exists. We quote it all over law school because of corruption and abuse of office. Every time you talk about corruption, then you talk about Kapchorwa District Council versus the gentleman that was now released by the president. Now, if we continually see corruption today, young people appear on streets, the girls, their breasts are pinched, they are beaten, they are thrown behind pickups because they are speaking against corruption, they criminalize you, and yet you have a convention which you ratified as a nation saying we're going to deal with this problem because we realize if we have the 80 trillion that the IGG says is lost to corruption annually, then it will improve our health system, it will improve our education system, it will improve our economic state of well-being for Ugandans. I think we know what we need, but we are failing to do it as a people. One, that we are not principled, even us ourselves. If you look at, we have, for example, we have a parliament, we have the executive, we have the legislature. You become a judge, and the things you are judging are against the law which you're supposed to defend. Then how do you hope to improve the governance of your country? Because you see, everywhere you are called to serve, Timothy. Even you where you're seated, you are serving this nation. Now, in that service, are you improving the governance of this country, or are you making it worse? And I think that's where we lose the ball. We like to point fingers to everybody else, and we forget our own big logs that sit with us in the spaces in which we sit. Accountability starts with each one of us. Accountability is as small as saying I'm going to be on UBC at 10 and I am there. That is accountability. But people don't want to be accountable, but they want to point fingers elsewhere. So the Uganda we want will start by each of us reflecting on what role have I played to improve my society. Right now, parents are no longer looking after their children. They are traveling, they are at the beach, they are wearing 1/4 pant, damaged jeans, breasts out, and this is what you're raising your child to be. So the generation that will follow after here, they'll be creating AI, they'll be creating fakes, they'll be doing all the things that they saw their parents doing, and that doesn't ring a bell to any parent out there that this is what you're bequeathing. So the Uganda we want is going to be a holistic journey. On the governance spectrum, like they have told you, we have laws, we have standards that have been set. Can we follow those standards? If we have ratified instruments, Do we know what we signed up to? If we don't know, can we reorganize ourselves to understand? East Africa community has called on partner states, for example, to respect democracy. Recently, the president called people to State House in Entebbe and told South Sudan, you hold an election. It is good for South Sudan to follow democracy. Why? Why would the president believe in democracy? Why would he believe in elections? Because he knows they are good. They are good standards. They are good processes that improve governance. And my friend Charles Onyango-Obbo sat down and wrote a piece and said, look, it's better to hold a bad election than not to have one altogether. Timothy, if we were in Syria right now, we would not be seated on this TV set. Because why? We don't know if we would be living or not. At least the president has given us 34 years of stability. And if in 34 years, Ugandans have failed to agree even on simple principles, you see, we can't sit in a room and just agree on what are our values as a country. We begin to scratch our heads. Then we know the Uganda we want, we have the aspirations for that Uganda, but we are not taking steps towards achieving that Uganda. We want a Uganda which looks like Ghana, which looks like Botswana. We want a Uganda which looks like Namibia. Namibia has a woman president now. Congratulations to Namibia. It's an African country. It has a woman president. On my continent, it's not usual to see a woman become a president, but they have achieved it. And through a democratic process. In Kenya, of recent, with all the things that have been happening, Uhuru now is in talks with Ruto. They meet and have agreed that they will have continuous conversations about their country and how to improve the governance of their country. Now, those are people who understand that there is economic development in Kenya, there is interests which we have as Kenyan people. We don't want to kill ourselves, so we are all leaders, we are all powerful, we can cause trouble for each other when you are in the chair. Me as Uhuru, I have influence, I can cause the Kikuyu to hate you, and I can cause more Gen Zs to go onto the street, but maybe that's not the best approach. Let's begin to have conversations. Do we have that in Uganda? Do we have space on the political scene where different differing voices can have constructive conversation? It's not there. It's not there. The moment I say I am Noop today, and I'm standing on a Noop ticket, then all hell breaks loose from every other political party. You're anti-government, you're anti-programs of government. It's not supposed to be like that. Because even if I am Noop, even if I'm DP, even if I'm UPC, we have a Vision 2040, which is called a Uganda Vision 2040. It's not called NRM Vision 2040. No. Neither is it called the national plan. It's called national plan, national. So when he talks about a nation state, then what he's saying, we need to think of ourselves as Ugandans first, nationalistically. What is that one thing we stand for? Do you know that even if they played an anthem, Timothy, some people will stay seated. So they don't connect to it. So you're saying, what is the Uganda we want? The Uganda I want is one where people will hear that anthem and be very proud that, oh, the Uganda anthem is being played. But they can't be proud because of what my friend tweeted there. He said there is poverty. I wake up in the morning, I'm looking for 100 shillings, 10,000. I'm poor. I don't have money. I don't even know where to get it from. I don't know where the opportunities are. And I have a member of parliament who is seated in parliament, knows about the so many opportunities, and he is not linking me. We need, that is the Uganda we want. The Uganda we want is one that identifies how many people are in the poverty bracket, this number. How many people are working towards removing that? How many people are we pushing into education? What kind of education are we giving them? And how many opportunities are available out there? I'll tell you that a country called Palestine, and not Palestine, Philippines, sent young people into America. Even China did it, to learn how the Americans were making phones. And they told them, learn everything about the phones, but identify gaps about what was there on the phone. They identified there were no screensavers. So there was a phone, there was a screen, but there were no screensavers. So if the phone fell down, it would crash. They identified there was no guard. This one, this jacket. They started producing these jackets and they started producing the screensavers. And they became a powerful market for the American people. And they have money. Taiwan right now is driving AI. They're the ones who are doing all the undercurrent research for United States and China. China and United States are fighting over Taiwan because the people of Taiwan identified that these two people have money. This is what we can provide for them, research. We become their research laboratories. But that didn't fall out of the sky. The government had to sit back, think in terms of policy, how do we target? Uganda, because of a strong president, okay, he has galvanized this region. We have Congo, we have Kenya, we have Tanzania, we have Central African Republic, all these countries here. When he went to the East African community, they bowed down at him. But now, what one thing has the minister and the people who are in cabinet and in key positions done for Ugandans to understand Somalia is open to you to trade. Congo is open to you to trade. Do this so you get this. And the wealth comes to Uganda. You mean if people were rich, they would be here shouting all the time? No. They would be able now to connect and know, okay, I want Mukasambide to represent me because of X, Y, and Z. I have my money. But because you're poor, you're struggling, you are taken advantage of, you're gullible. So the Uganda I want is one where everybody prospers. Okay.
Thank you very much. And you know, what you said about Taiwan reminded me of when I was doing my undergrad in India. Rwanda sent 1,000 students with specific courses to study, with specific jobs waiting for them back in Rwanda. Very Honorable Minister, let me come to you. And the conversation. Can we have a conversation, the NRM, with different political players, not on your terms, not on your own playing field, but also to listen to diverse opinions and suggestions? Is that a possibility for the Uganda we all want?
I think the only lady on the panel has said it all. We have laws, we have standards, let us follow them. And if there is any lacuna in the law, if there is anything which is not favorable, let's look at it and discuss it. And NRM is open to discussions, constructive and objective discussions. That's why it has gone into partnership with political parties, for instance, DP. We have UPC. And a memorandum of understanding with them, UPC. There was a creation of iPod to discuss issues concerning political parties.
And it was an NGO, though. It wasn't a government initiative. Now, it was an NGO.
Yeah. Now, what actually we need is for all of us to have a common interest. If we can really understand, yes, common interests, common values, common principles, and then we start discussing the Uganda we want. And as NRM, we are open for those discussions. And the NRM has never given any conditions for discussions. But so long as parties are still probably focusing only on President Museveni as the problem of Uganda, then we shan't have any constructive discussions. Because whether we like it or not, by nature or whatever, President Museveni will go. And Uganda will do what? Will remain.
Has the NRM thought about that?
So, yes, the NRM, the NRM knows that. And it is a reality. You cannot just think it will never happen. It will.
So what have you done about it?
I think for us, we are preparing ourselves as NRM internally. And what I would like to say, other political parties should also organize themselves internally. And you know, the fight might not be even between NRM and other parties. There are also fights between other political parties. There are also fights within political parties. And me, I would love that all that should stop. And then we focus on the Uganda we want, and all of us look for a way how we can sort out our issues. Just like the Kenyan, the Kenya type of situation. They fight today, but tomorrow they start thinking about what is Kenya benefiting out of this. And they come together and start what? Discussing. Otherwise, if you remember what happened in Kenya about 3 months ago or whatever, you may not think it's the Kenya now. They have already settled and they are moving forward.
How do we get to such a place? Honorable Minister was saying the Monitor has been reporting this whole week, young people that have been incarcerated, abducted, kidnapped, and all these stories. And there are a lot of stories there. There is the court-martial that is being in question. There is the judiciary. There is the, recently corruption of parliament, all these things. All these things are happening, and you're giving us such a glossy picture of what the NRM is doing. We need an environment that has everyone playing for the Uganda we want.
Obviously, there have been, Uganda has had its own share of insecurity, first of all. And therefore, it's a country which is very, very cautious about what is taking place. And the good thing is that we have the rule of law. At least nobody has disappeared, just as our lady here was saying. In some countries or the past, wouldn't even be discussing this, someone would be worried. But at least nobody would be arrested outside this studio. And those people who have been arrested, most of them have been taken to court. And when the government loses cases, they go out, they gain their freedom. And what I would like to also say is, if we have guidelines of demonstrations, let us try to follow them. But I would also like to say, there are times where you meet, there is excessive force used on demonstrators. And me, I condemn it, 100%. I don't believe in that. But also, let people follow proper guidelines of what? Of demonstration, so that we don't get these scenarios from time to time. But I would like to say, I think we started somewhere as far as our democracy is concerned. And with time, we shall reach a perfect situation. But it's not yet at the level where I would say we are okay.
Okay.
We still have a journey to move. But the most important thing is, all of us in politics should love our country, should think about our common interests, our common values, our common principles, whether you're in NRM, whether you're in DP, whether you are in NUP. All parties have its own shares, its own share of blame. We cannot say there is a party in Uganda here which is very, very what? Perfect. But let us all sit on a round table as parties, NRM and others, and then we look at how we should really develop our country. Because the biggest problem now, and we have all agreed, and even the president knows, is poverty.
Okay.
And then the next one is corruption. And there's no doubt about it. We have to look for medicine for these two if we are to really even get perfect democracy.
Thank you. Let me read some feedback before I give you parting shots. The Uganda we want is where national celebrations or events will not be taken as NRM events, where those in power preach peace, unity, and reconciliation. Okay. One thing said by the professor is electoral reform should be done immediately, but they should be done after elections. What is his comment on that? Okay. Tumsime from Hoima says, okay, this is a technical problem. I'll ask the technical team to sort that out. Good evening, panelists. I think the weakness of Parliament is a show of other institutions like the judiciary and the legislature or the executive where the president is using his authority to act in a way because what the parliament is supposed to be doing is not being solved? Is it on a true account that the members of parliament have been found struggling to support the motion, even if it's bad for even those, for themselves, but because they will get some money for it? This needs to be totally forgotten, and we need to be serious about political parties, okay? Quite lengthy. Good evening, Timothy. The views, Africa will never change the political environment until it stops fighting the systems that are managing it, which was intended to keep the Africans vulnerable. Most especially the education system is the foundation of everything. Schools teach theory, which people live by and take note, meaning that our country will remain beggars. Okay, thank you very much, Caleb from Kanungu. And finally, good evening, Timothy. NRM has 4 core principles, okay? Patriotism, Pan-Africanism, democracy, socio-economic transformation. Now, talking of democracy, ensuring that we have the period of election is very key, a very key element, and someone should talk about democracy. Rule of law is exercised in Uganda, though some few challenges are here and there. This is a submission from Timothy in Mengo there. Okay, we're going to do parting shots a little bit differently. So we're going to also hint on the case that is ongoing in the court martial of Dr. Besigye. 9 reasons given for Martha Karua not to receive her temporary practicing certificate. A comment on that and your concluding remarks. I'll start with Charity, Honorable Mbide, Professor Nicholas, and finally the Minister.
So my parting shots on that one is that we have hit a stalemate with our neighbors who are Kenya. That number one, Dr. Besigye was picked up without following the correct diplomatic protocol. You see, when you enter a country, they stamp that you've entered. When you're leaving, they also stamp that you have. So all these things, we flaunted them. They are standards. Those standards were set for countries to respect each other. Questions of jurisdiction. Now, when Martha Karua came here, she said, look, internationally and even regionally in the African continent, when there is a crisis, we can work together as lawyers to bring sanity into a country. We want to use the rule of law, okay, to drive home standards of what we can do as countries using laws, not guns, not bullets, not pangas. So she wanted a practicing certificate, and so did all the other lawyers that were supposed to fly in. 100 lawyers from the African continent were coming to defend Dr. Kizza Besigye. And for me, I thought this was a good precedent. You see, in jurisprudence, you need precedents. Precedents that you refer to, that in the year 2024, 100 lawyers gathered from across Africa to defend a certain case which looked like this, and it helped us to resolve it like this. So the Law Council has denied us an opportunity to use the law to resolve a political crisis. It will not be new to Uganda. The ghost of my friend Expate Matovu still hangs around. But what we need as a country is to move beyond politicizing good processes and let the law always take its course. The Law Council should be ashamed of what they did.
Honorable Mbide.
Yes, also obviously in addition to what Madam Charity has stated, the basis of integration and cooperation of countries, generally the goodwill. We expect goodwill from all and sundry, including Law Council, that the East African community can achieve its integration agenda. We are aware that, of course, pursuant to the treaty and the Common Market Protocol, particularly Article 11, there is harmonization, mutual recognition of professions and qualifications in East Africa, of all the 8 countries. But even when we have not yet established, for example, a cross-border legal practice instrument that is by way of an act of parliament, Law Council ought to have understood that at a level of policy we have already arrived there, and they had they are only noble duty to confirm that by giving the Honorable Martha Karua a practicing certificate without any due regard, by the way, to technicalities and of course exalting themselves as having a world of what they call discretion. Discretion follows the law. Of course, citing, of course, powers given to them under the Advocates Act, which is an act of just one country. In my opinion, we missed out, just like Madam Charity has stated. Number two, the trial of Dr. Besigye, who actually was abducted from Kenya. Even if we had an extradition agreement between Uganda and Kenya, the agreement itself gives details of procedures for extradition of anybody suspected of having committed an extradition crime. And that proceeding never took place in Kenya. It certainly never took place anywhere. And now he finds himself in a tribunal that is intended to try soldiers. So if you are arrested in Kenya, whether with 10 guns or 20, a substantive tribunal that is established to try soldiers, unless, of course, one of the methods of recruitment of the UPDF is by traveling to Kenya with guns. Because if you, in my opinion, you don't, without even any due regard to a stay of execution of a decision of a constitutional court that actually outlawed the court martial. You see, goodwill is very important. In my opinion, it is generally the bedrock. It is the faucet origo. It is the start of point where we must definitely now rely to proceed forward. In my opinion, the country missed out on that.
Professor Ndebesa.
On that question you have raised, this issue. First of all, the listeners out there should not misunderstand us. We are not talking about the substance of the crime. We are talking about the procedures where they have reached, because the substance we don't know. Now, I earlier on said that democracy needs to be unpacked so that we see elements within democracy. And one of the principles of NRM is democracy. So democracy is not holding only elections after 5 years. We said it is a rule of law, it is checks and balances, it is equality, it is participation, and some others. So, now, in the question of rule of law, I don't know, these lawyers can help us. If you have committed a crime in Kenya, I thought you should be charged in Kenya, but you see, he's charged in Uganda for a crime, supposedly of holding a gun in Kenya. There must be some procedures for extradition, and I don't think they were followed. But let me comment on another principle of democracy, which is equality, and I think all of us agree that equality is a principle of democracy. So, I don't know, we were told here that actually General Kale Kayihura was arrested and arraigned before the court martial because he was assisting the government of Rwanda to abduct Rwandan dissidents from Uganda and taking them to Rwanda without due process of the law. Am I making sense?
Yes.
Now, if it is equality, then why did a dissident, if he is a dissident, I'm not talking about the merits of the case, from Kenya, he is abducted and brought to Uganda. If it was actually equality, the operatives who brought him here should actually be arraigned before the court martial. Just like Kayihura was also arraigned before the court martial because they broke the process. So equality is very important, and let's not practice hypocrisy and think we are building a nation. I will still insist building a nation. But allow me just a second to comment on the question of rule of law, which we, of laws versus practice we started with. Honorable here, Honorable Minister can agree with me that the NRM, the constitution of NRM says that all posts of NRM are open for competition, isn't it? I thought that is the case.
Yes.
And that's what I have heard. Yeah, but the chairman and his vice have never been competed for. So that's why I'm saying the question is not the sort of, she has just pointed out how we have got anti-corruption laws, we have ratified international conventions about corruption, but we still have corruption. If you go to Parliament today, as a member of Parliament, we have got a public finance
An Accountability Act.
Management Act.
Management Act. The Auditor General, every report nearly, is complaining about the government public servants not following that act. Nearly every report. Does that mean the act is not there? My take is that the question of this legalism is not enough. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't have laws. But I think the major problem of governance that we have, of democracy we have, is not necessarily the lacuna of laws, it is the political question.
Okay. Nicholas, over to you.
The Honorable Lady Justice Irene Muliagonja is an outstanding judge, sober-headed, has demonstrated over time that she's a stickler to the law. She chairs the Law Council. I hope that she will find it within her power to revisit the decision of the Law Council, because the decision of the Law Council has waded the Law Council into murky waters of the politics of the case. I didn't think she should have, or the Law Council should have taken that route. I remain optimistic that they will revisit this decision. And I hope they can also invite the President of the Law Society, who is by law a member of Law Council. He has publicly stated that he was maliciously excluded from the meeting that considered the decision of whether to issue or not to issue a special certificate of practice to the Honorable Senior Counsel Martha Karua. I really pray that they will revisit that decision.
So you are
soon
agreeing
as
with
possible.
me that there is a law which says that the President of Uganda Law Society is also
He's a member.
automatically a member of the Law Council, but he was not invited.
He wasn't invited.
So is that the lacuna of the law?
So I really do pray that, Lady Justice, if you're listening or if you listen to this recording, you revisit that decision of the Law Council. It is taking the Law Council into murky waters, and it doesn't look good. It just looks ugly.
Thank you very much.
The same thing applies to the trial of Dr. Kizza Besigye in the General Court Martial. There cannot be any semblance of justice for a civilian in a General Court Martial. We've stated this time and again. You can even tell the body language of the people on the court martial. As the lawyers were submitting, nobody was writing. They looked disinterested. Arms folded, mouth twisted, right?
Calling them rhetorics.
There is really no semblance of justice in that courtroom for any civilians. There's even worse abuse of fundamental due process for soldiers. I did a study for the Uganda Human Rights Commission and the UN Human Rights Office when they were still here on justice in the military court. Even for military serving officers, that place is a hellhole for all of them. So it's even much more difficult for a civilian. So the trial of Dr. Kizza Besigye in the General Court Martial is shrouded with illegalities, and I think that we owe it to this country, and in particular Dr. Kizza Besigye and his co-accused, Haji Obed Kamleger, to take away that case from the military. If they committed any crime, follow due process, take them to a civilian court, and use that evidence. What's happening in that court is shameful, and I think in my view unlawful. And finally, on what the country needs, Honorable Minister wants a discussion. This country does not need a discussion, because it's talking about, come let's slice and dice the piece of the cake. This country needs a national dialogue. This country is hurting. In his own village, young children were killed and dropped in burning huts and fires and killed by this government. The commander of that operation was promoted. He's now in a higher office. No accountability. Instead, it is the victims, his king, their guards, domestic servants who spent years in prison on accusations that have no merit. People in the streets were killed by this government in the last election in an extrajudicial killing, where President Museveni admitted to killing 54. our research and investigation revealed there were more than 54. By the time of my arrest, we had recorded 158 people killed. No justice whatsoever. This country is hurting. The families of those children that the soldiers killed on the streets, the families of those people in Kasese who were killed by the government cannot feel the value that the professor is talking about. I just came back from Karamoja. Every time I come back from Karamoja, my heart bleeds. It just seemed to be a world of its own. They cannot feel the value of Uganda. We need a national dialogue to restore that common belief in a country called Uganda. Otherwise, it seems Uganda is for others, while the rest of us suffer, while the minister drives in his large taxpayer-funded SUV. A woman in Karamoja is dying because there's no health center. The child in Karamoja is not going to school, he's going without food, while the minister can afford to fly out of the country for medical treatment. We cannot feel the value of this country unless we develop that, what Councillor David Mpanga calls the central nervous system, to feel the pain of others.
Thank you very much. Lastly, the Honorable Minister.
Nicholas told he made the research for Uganda Human Rights Commission. They paid him good money, I think. So
No.
So he's also benefiting.
It wasn't for that. It wasn't for that.
But that would be a story. That would be a topic of another day. But first of all, let me first clarify one thing. President Museveni, nobody has ever stopped anyone from NRM to compete for the chair and vice chair of NRM. Nobody. But they call for nominations, and those two put in their nominations, and they go unopposed. And that's democracy.
He said this with a straight face.
Yes. But let me, on the issue of Martha Karua, I think there's a problem also, there's a problem with the law council. Because even advocacy, lawyers here who have completed the LDC, even before this Martha Karua case, I'd had complaints from several lawyers that it takes 3 years to get a practicing certificate. I don't know how far it is.
It is true.
That you apply and take about 3 years, even when you're Ugandan. So I think there is a problem somewhere in law council. People have completed LODC, parents have paid for fees, but they ask for a practicing certificate from law council. It takes about what? 3 years. So I think there is a problem, and there is something that needs to be done on that one. And just as everybody on the panel says, I believe there should be something that should be done. Martha Karua wouldn't have been stopped from getting a practicing certificate. Personally, I think it was not fair.
Can you offer national guidance for her to get this?
And now I'm offering national guidance.
Yes.
Because I've said it was not what?
Yes.
Fair. Because
You are guiding that what?
oh yes,
The country.
there should be because as East African community,
Yes.
we should have some arrangement.
Yes.
Because I don't see why,
Yes.
if you have, for instance, if I have a driving permit, Uganda driving permit, I'll drive in Kenya. I'm not going to be issued another what? Driving permit. I'll drive in Tanzania. I've done so. I'll drive in Rwanda. So if I have a practicing certificate in Kenya, why shouldn't I practice in Uganda? Because this is East Africa. And personally, I feel that one should be sorted at diplomatic level. And for the case of Chiza Besigye, I will not comment much. Let us wait for the case to proceed. If there are any laws that were flouted, then Kizza Besigye will have a good case. And
before the general court
I would do, all those will be decided by the courts of law, because I have not gone deep into the nitty-gritties of how he was arrested and the like. But the most important thing, we know where he is. And we pray that the General Court Martial should expedite this process, the court process, because justice delayed is justice denied.
Okay.
And I would like to pray that court expedites this so that we can know what really happened. For the case of the Kasese killings, it will be another topic. We shall come.
Thank you very much.
And I will give you some insights about
I want to
those
thank the
matters.
team that has made today possible, the guys on the floor, but also the guys in the control room that have made today possible. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you very much for gracing and accepting our invite to be here today. We'll end it this way. Accepting both compliments and criticism, it takes both the sun and the rain for a flower to grow. God bless you.